deals with the concepts or the emergence of the concepts of communication theory, and here, more specifically from 1870 to 1938. And remember that this era, in fact, and this era witnessed the emergence and, of course, here the appearance of a lot of, generally speaking, scholars who changed the world. So this means that on, let's say, the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, in fact, marked a lot of changes. Now, as I said, in the last quarter of the 19th century, sociologists, generally speaking, we're talking here about sociologists. What is the need here to focus on sociologists, in fact? Why do we need sociologists in the last quarter of the 19th century, in your opinion? Why do we need them? And pay attention. Sociologists, and pay attention to the nationality of the sociologists here. We have Germany and we have the United States. Yes. What we talk about sociology. What is sociology? It's the study of what? Sociology. Yes? Anyway, by the way, I want to use with you the communicative approach. This means that I want to communicate with you and interact with you. I don't want to be a lecturer. What is a lecturer? A lecturer is the professor who just lectures without caring about his students, whether they understand or they don't understand. I don't want to do that with you guys. I need to hear you and I need to know your opinion in order either to shed light, continue, etc. If you would like me to be a lecturer, I will be a lecturer. I need to hear your comments, please. And as I told you, I can't read them. Because now, I'm using my full screen. Okay? Now, would you like me to be between brackets or to use the communicative approach or to be a lecturer? It's up to you. Go ahead. We don't want to let's say, to lose more time here and to waste time. What's your opinion? A lecturer or using the communicative approach? Yes, go ahead. Anyway, no answer. Okay, I will continue. And here, anyway, if you don't understand something, you can stop. Listen. As I told you, generally speaking, here the focus, in fact, the focus is on sociologists, because here you have to know that, in fact, let's say the 19th or the last quarter of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th or 20th century marked, of course, the emergence of a lot of scholars, mostly, in fact, in sociology. They are sociologists, or they were sociologists. For one simple reason, a lot of changes. And these ideologies changed the world. So most of these ideologies, in fact, changed the nature, the frame of, let's say, of the Western society in general. And here we are talking about Germany. And you have to understand that even those who resided at that time in the United States, in fact, and were considered as, let's say, American citizens, in fact, originate from Europe, originates mostly from Germany or from France itself, or sometimes from England or from, let's say, the United Kingdom in general. Now, in fact, these sociologists focused on, as I said, on the society in general, the changes in order to improve, in order to improve the quality of life in the Western society. And Albert Chubb, pay attention to these names because we will encounter them in the future, inshallah, and it's really important to know them. And Charles Houghton Colley in the United States conceived communication as the central mechanism, pay attention, the central mechanism through which society constituted itself. Which means that, in fact, the emergence of different media tools and media gadgets at that time changed, as I said again, and so on and so forth. Running parallel in the discourse of communication was an increasing focus on newspapers as an object of study. Now, again, underline newspapers. Here, in fact, newspapers played an important role because people at that time, remember we're talking about the end of the 19th century, so people became capable of knowing what was going around them, what was going on around them in fact, and it's really important. So here's discovering the world again, okay? Knowing. In the 19th century, national histories of the press appeared in many countries, even in, let's say, in the Arab world, and especially in Egypt. By the way, Egypt was a leading country, of course, here in of course, let's say, the press industry, because it's considered as an industry in itself. While writers like Alexis de Tocqueville and John Stuart Mill connected newspapers to information of public opinion. That's it. This means that editorials and editors started to appear. And pay attention here. You're not supposed only to know. You're not supposed only to know, but you are supposed, as a reader, you're supposed, in fact, to react. And this reaction is related to me. And here, mostly, I want to influence you, okay, to influence you to harbor what I have in my mind. This is ideology. Remember that here we're talking about the needle hypodermic approach. And this approach is really important. So pay attention here. Connected newspapers to the forming public opinion. Okay? I want to shape it accordingly. I want to shape it according to the ideology that I want to transmit to the others. Okay? Any questions? Good. It is clear. Next. And remember, guys, I can't read your comments. Now, journalism as an industry, or the press industry, we say either the press industry or journalism in general, began to professionalize itself across a number of countries. Now, okay, journalists, or at that time, journalists became professionals. Okay, here, taking trainings, okay, taking their own trainings, of course, here, selecting and taking, of course, the selection of those journalists was not an easy process, taking into account a number, of course, of criteria. Anyway, across a number of countries and became a subject taught. Pay attention here. Teaching. So journalism became in itself a course. So it became a course taught in some universities. I'm talking about the Western world, the United States, Europe, not Morocco, by the way. Anyway, the first university, of course, to be established or to be set up in Morocco was in Rabat. By the way, Mohammed V University. Mohammed V University is the oldest university in Morocco. Now, in some universities, and US, I'm not talking, of course, about Arawi, forget about that. Anyway, in some universities, and US and Germany led the way. Back on here. The United States and Germany led the way. Leaders, of course, here in this industry. Now, the interwar years, interwar. What do you mean here by interwar? Here, interwar, I'm talking here about, pay attention, let's say the era, or that marks the end of the First World War and the beginning of the Second World War. Okay? Now, the interwar years brought an explosion of interest that would, by the 1940s, be classed as forms of communication. This means that, in fact, we needed communication. We needed communication, recently, or let's say in the 1920s, etc., and again to influence and to manipulate the masses. This is really important. Again, masses. In fact, masses is, generally speaking, or have a negative connotation, in fact, because according to different scholars, masses are those who, most of them, those who just swallow, those who, let's say, read passively, okay, or view passively. They do not view actively. They do not use their critical thinking because, in fact, they don't own it. They don't possess critical thinking. Prior knowledge doesn't exist. Once prior knowledge doesn't exist, in fact, it becomes very easy for me to manipulate you and to affect you. Okay? This means that, in fact, you should know. You cannot talk about being, not talk about knowledgeable people, or you cannot talk to me about you as belonging to, let's say, as an intellectual or belonging to the elite without possessing prior knowledge. Now, in the United States, the term mass communication, and remember here, mass is related to a huge number of people. Okay? A huge number of people. Mass communication was coined in the 1920s, spurred by the intervention of the radio. The radio reaches a huge number of people. A lot of people, okay, listen to the radio. Millions of people listen to the radio. Even billions of people can listen to the radio if they want to. Now, of radio broadcasting, and soon coming to encompass or include newspapers, magazines, movies, and television. So here, at first, okay, mass communication included only, of course, the radio or radio broadcasting. But later, mass communication started, of course, to involve also newspapers. So newspapers, at that time, magazines, movies, etc., started to be considered as means of communication or as means of mass communication. Now, mass communication was sometimes a rhetorical alternative to propaganda. So instead of using propaganda, now I want to discuss propaganda with you. What do you understand from propaganda? Now I will go back to the platform. You can write it. I need to know your comments about this. What do you understand? Yes, guys, can you hear me? Because I read a comment by Khawla. She said that she can't hear me. Do you hear me clearly, guys?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, good. Now, propaganda. What do you understand from propaganda? You are free. You can talk or you can write now because you can keyboard. I can see your comments. What do you understand from propaganda? We say sometimes propaganda war, for example. Propaganda war. Why do we need propaganda? What is the need? Of course, here to set up this propaganda. Yes, guys. Propaganda. Yes? You can open another if you want. Guys, next year, your students might ask you about propaganda. So it's not, people tell them, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't have an idea. What is propaganda? Come on. It's not an exchange of ideas, Zahra. It's not that. Idea, okay, some idea or statements that are, 1 minute, that they are exaggerated and spread in order to record a political leader. Yes, it's a kind of information by people to influence others. Yes, in fact, the objective here is to influence, but in fact, it's the main objective is to influence the receiver, the reader, the listener, the interlocutor. Thank you for your comment. Good. Now, when we say, for example, propaganda war, automatically we we refer, in fact, to those articles, newspaper articles or reports, okay, written or let's say broadcast in order to convince and to persuade the listener. I want, let's say, as I said, I want you to hold and I want you to harbor, attention, to harbor the same ideology. For example, let's say that I want to, let's talk about the example of Iraq. So before attacking Iraq by the United States, before let's say occupying Iraq and intervening in Iraq, the United States in fact launched a propaganda article, let's say report against Saddam Hussein, claiming that he possessed nuclear weapons, that he will affect the region, he is vicious, he is. Generally speaking, in fact, they wanted, as I said, to legitimize something, to make it legitimate. Okay? I know that, of course, intervening and attacking or occupying a different country is a vicious action. Automatically, I need to legitimize it. Okay? And to give it that legitimate frame. And this is exactly what the United States did. The United States and its allies. This is exactly what they did, of course, in 2001. This is really dangerous because sometimes the problem here, in fact, or the objective, as I said, is to influence you, to convince you, and to persuade you. So that's why, as I said, that the mass communication is sometimes referred to as propaganda. Okay? Let's finish. Or let's continue. Now, we have public relations now. Public relations, or what we call now العلاقات الدولية, is really important. Public relations. So public relations developed as a professional field in the interwar. We needed public relations again, not just to influence or to manipulate the masses, but also, again, as I said, to legitimize something. What is this something? To, let's say, to transmit, okay, to transmit and also to exchange the different opinions and different, let's say, different relations. And it's really important. So public relations developed as a professional field in the interwar years, and scoring the social importance given to public communication captured by the new publicistic coin. Sorry, it's German. I didn't pronounce it correctly. Coined by Carl Jaeger in 1926. Public relations. Today we have public relations. Okay? We have public relations, and of course, mostly, remember, we're talking here about the history of communication theory. Other developments in this era or this period included the proliferation or the spread of the radio, became the main medium in the 1930s. And you have to take into account that Adolf Hitler employed the radio to affect the German listener. And a lot of studies took place in the 1930s by the Frankfurt School and by, of course, here pioneer scholars. Adorno, etc. We'll come back to this later. Its proliferation or expansion resulted in the emergence or appearance of researchers who studied the impact of the existing media. Today, we have researchers who study the impacts of the mobile phone or the internet or let's say Facebook or let's say different social attention, different social let's say media tools, their effects and their impacts on the receiver, the reader, the viewer, the user, and so forth. Therefore, it's really important to take into account that also at that time, the proliferation of the radio resulted again, in the images of researchers who wanted, in fact, to study the impacts and the effects of the radio on the listener, of course, on the listener in general. The Frankfurt School. Pay attention to this school. Guys, I asked you, again, I'm expecting your comment. I'll go back to the platform. I asked you yesterday about the Frankfurt School. Okay? And in fact, I was shocked because I discovered that you have nothing in your mind regarding the Frankfurt School, regarding the agenda system theory, regarding this is what you studied, in fact, in X4. In fact, I didn't want to write my report yesterday. Normally, I am supposed to write a report. It's a catastrophe. Normally, you should have studied media theories. So what did you study? What did you study in X4 in media studies? What did you study, in fact? That's what I want to know. If you didn't study the Frankfurt School, no, sir, it's not media literacy. It's not media literacy, Sukaina. You are not supposed to say this. We have, of course, description, and it is supposed to be respected. You are, no, I'm asking you now about the Frankfurt School. And by the way, I have already, of course, here agreed with Professor Derir and Professor Sabir Shadi, not, of course, here, not to include media theories because it is, of course, it's in unit number 7, and we don't have time for that. And we agree not to include it, assuming that this is what you studied in S4. Okay? And it's a problem in itself. Generally speaking, you are supposed to study all media theories. Use student gratification approach, the hypodemic needle, the Frankfurt School, agenda system theory, okay? And so on and so forth. We have more than, let's say, 10 approaches, 10 theories. And in fact, you are supposed to cover or to deal with a theory, of course, in a session. And this is really important. You cannot understand, by the way, you will find difficulties to understand general communication theory in these theories without shedding light on these schools of thought. It is our schools of thought when we talk about the Frankfurt School. So please, this is what we need to do today. You have the Frankfurt School. Of course, I want you to, of course, here, to surface and to read about it, and to read about its pioneers, its pioneer scholars. It's really important to know about it. And if you can, okay, read about some media, I want you to go to keyboard. Yes, this is what you're supposed to do. So just keyboard, media theories. It's not your Orientalism, sir. Yes, amen. Orientalism is related to, in fact, to study Orientalism in cultural studies in S4 normally. It's part of S4. Okay? And it's part of introduction to cultural studies, in fact, and not media studies. Orientalism. And shedding light on Edward Said. Come on. Anyway.
Yes, but the teacher, that's what we studied in the S4.
Professor. I knew it. Anyway.
Yes.
His specialty, anyway, his specialty of course is literature. No. He was, anyway, I'm not going to get into this, but I will talk to him. It's not related to Orientalism, as I told you. Nor you are supposed, in fact, to study the radio, television, newspapers, magazines, to have an idea about it, to have an idea about the components, for example, the components of the magazine. What do we have in the magazine? How do we analyze the magazine? What are the important, let's say, the components of the radio? What do we call, let's say, those who work, let's say, a radio channel, and including or encompassing this, and in addition to that, along with this, you're supposed at the same time, in fact, to study media theories. Okay? So here, this is it. Anyway, something else. As I told you, now it's your task, in fact, to keyboard it and to certain it in order to know more about it. Otherwise, as I said, you would encounter difficulties in this semester. I will try, of course, to simplify might encounter difficulties. Believe me. Because here normally you don't have the basics. Now you lack the basics, in fact. Anyway, let's continue. As I said, here, the Frankfurt School, Lagerfeld Institute, and Rockefeller Foundation, so this is what we call it. So this school, the Frankfurt School, in fact, played crucial roles, very important, in developing the emergent field of science. How? In fact, the Frankfurt School, as I said, was set up by a number of German scholars. And these German scholars, in fact, fled to the United States. They escaped to the United States. He escaped the United States when Adolf Hitler became, the counselor or the chancellor. Okay, the same time is the counselor and the chancellor. So he became the chair of Germany. He knew that Adolf Hitler would affect the German nation, and he was an autocrat, a dictator. Automatically, he fled and he escaped to the United States. And he created and set up the Frankfurt School. The first approach, which is directly related to, or let's say, that was produced and that is directly related to the Frankfurt School, is, as I said, the hypodemic needle theory or approach. At that time, in fact, it was only an approach, but now it is a theory in itself. Now, according to this theory, in fact, mass media in general, or those behind mass media, or behind these means of communication, these, let's say, media tools, what do? In fact, they inject, according to this, they inject, in fact, their thoughts, beliefs, in general, ideology. So, in general, they inject their ideology step by step, drop by drop. Okay? And they take their time in order to push you, for example, to believe that James is not a good person. I need time. I'm not going to do it. It's impossible, in fact, to be done at once. I need time. And gradual change, in fact. Now, I know, for example, that you have beliefs, not sub-beliefs, sub-beliefs A, B, C, D, A, or E, X, etc. Now, what I'm going to do, first, I need to convince you and to persuade you that your sub-belief A is incorrect. Therefore, I'm going to destroy it and going to replace it, say, for example, with A plus. Then I have finished from A, I will move to B. The same thing. I'm going to destroy B and let's say replace it, okay? Or use a different replacement. Then number 3, number 4. Gradually, and here I'm gradually going to, let's say, to influence you and to push you, as I said, to harbor my own beliefs and my own ideology. Is it clear? Do you understand now the basics of the Frankfurt School or the hypodemic needle theory? Please confirm if it's possible. Possible? Come on. Is it clear? Okay, good. Let's finish. Where did we stop? Yes. Now, we have finished from the first, remember, the first era starts in 1870 and ends in 1938. Now let's move to the second in communication studies or general communication studies. Theory 1. The second era, of course, here, yes, started in 1938 and ended in 1976. And we can also say starts in 1936 and 1939 and ends in 1967. Now, here, World War II. But remember that the Second World War started in 1939 when of course, here, when Hitler occupied, and ended or finished in 1945. Anyway, the Second World War, institutionalization, and US hegemony, also we call it hegemony. Okay, you are free to use G or G, gift or Ch. Next, welcome back to US hegemony, by the way. Now, by the way, I forgot, hegemony is another theory that you will study in media studies. Anyway, in the late 1940s, the first department of communication, but now we are talking about the departments of communication. The need to establish now departments, and mostly because of the Cold War between the United States and the USSR, Soviet Union. In the late 1940s, the first department of communication established, and Wilbur Schramm, by the way, we will tackle his model of communication. Okay? Wilbur Schramm founded what we call now the Institute for Communications Research at the University of Illinois. In the same era, which means the same period in the 1940s, the late 1940s, the National Society for the Study of Communication, this is another institute, was established. Disciplines of speech and speech. Now, again, the importance we are talking about the importance of speech, the importance of discourse, the importance of public speaking. How to convince. I am a leader, and in fact, I'm interested in convincing the others, in convincing the masses. Okay? What can I do to convince you as a passive reader, or as a passive listener, or as a passive viewer? Normally, I should employ different methods and approaches in communication to convince you, to harbor again, and to hold my own beliefs, to convince you that I am the best leader and that I'm the best candidate. And therefore, I want you to oppose me, or because I'm interested in remaining your presidents. Anyway, the discipline, remember we're talking about discipline, which means different fields of studies. We have discipline, for example, communication, business, different disciplines. Now, the discipline of speech and journalism slowly moved to embrace the term and of communication. So gradually, in the 1945, or in 1945, UNESCO, of course you are familiar with UNESCO, added a division, the mass communication, as part of its founding mission. UNESCO considered open communication as a means for advancing peace, knowledge, and cultural expression. Now, I'm talking about the 1940s again, 1940s and 1950s. The world discovered the importance of open communication, communicating openly with the others. Communication or open communication is important because this open communication, will enable me to understand, will enable me to tolerate your beliefs, and will enable me to totally understand your thoughts, your beliefs. And optically, if I am to understand you, this means that I will not hate you. And it's hatred, by the way, it's hatred. If we stop hate, okay, if we stop hatred, or if we stop hating the others, so if we stop hatred in general, be sure that, okay, wars will come to an end. We will stop wars I'm not talking about fighting with your wife or fighting with your sister. Or no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real hatred, passion. So this is it. UNESCO at that time discovered the importance of open communication. Why? As a means of advancing peace. I need peace. I need knowledge, understanding the others, and of course, and cultural expression. Okay? Now, this is my question. Let's say, what is the nation or what is the culture that you as a student, that you believe that let's say you utterly and you thoroughly understand it? I know that you communicate a lot with Americans, with American citizens, with French citizens, with, let's say, English citizens, etc., etc. Now, when you communicate with them, yes, what effect that takes place when this communication takes place, when this communication happens? Yes, you can keyboard it. Go ahead. Guys. Okay. Yes. So, okay. I said, okay, I will try to simplify it. When you cross-culturally communicate, you become, of course, capable of understanding, of course, some cultural aspects. Now, do these cultural aspects enable you, let's say, to understand the general culture of the country, or does your real culture, which means the Moroccan culture, okay, hampers you from understanding, or does it become, or does it remain, that the Moroccan culture remain an obstacle, of course, in understanding other cultures? God. Or to simplify it again, why do you communicate? I'm not, of course, expecting you to tell me to know about their cultures. No. Why do you like communicating with Americans, with French people, with, let's say, I don't know, Saudi Arabians, with why? Okay, so benefit that we always bring our cultural frame to the new culture we are discovering. Of course. Now, when you bring your culture frame, when you bring your culture aspects, do you make a comparison between your Moroccan culture and, of course, the target culture? Do you make a comparison? And when this comparison takes place, let's say, do clashes appear, or this comparison helps you avoid these clashes and these clashes between these two cultures? Yes, go ahead, the others. Yes. So Fatim Zara said, we make it. What about the others? Okay, so Mustafa said that it's just to find the aspects of other clusters, okay? We say cultures. Fakhoury Mounima help us avoid them. What do you mean by to help us avoid them? Avoid what? Clashes or cultures? So it helps us avoid the cultural clash. Good. Now you have to understand that when two cultures, when cultures are in contact, ethnocentrism takes ethnocentrist. I will keyword it. Okay, here it is. So generally speaking, ethnocentrism. What is ethnocentrism? In fact, ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture, or that your subcultural aspects are better than the target's subcultural aspects. When you, for example, sometimes while communicating with an Algerian or with, let's say, a Senegalese citizen or someone from, I don't know, an African country, for example, generally speaking, while communicating with that interlocutor, automatically, sometimes and unconsciously, you take into account that your culture, that the Moroccan culture is better than, let's say, the Senegalese culture, or than, let's say, the Algerian culture in terms of food. Oh, Moroccan food is the best. When you say, pay attention, when you automatically say and when you automatically believe that Moroccan food is better than the Algerian food or than the Egyptian food, automatically you should understand here that, in fact, that you have made a comparison between your original culture and, of course, the target culture, and automatically here you are a centrist because you believe that some cultural aspects in your culture or subculture are better than the subcultural aspects or the cultural aspects in the target culture. Is it clear? Let's finish. Now, from 1970 or not from 1947 on, the UNESCO would organize surveys, which means studies, etc., develop on the ground research, which means field research. Now, the UNESCO, in fact, started financing certain projects, certain studies in a number of countries, mostly, of course, by the United States, mostly by the United States and the Western world, to develop on the ground research, to develop, say, field research. Example, I am a researcher, automatically they would provide me with money, for example, and ask me, for example, to check, for example, of something. Here we would like you, please, you are a Moroccan researcher, we would like you to study, for example, the impact of the American culture on Moroccans. I will do it, and you will pay me, for example. So this is, of course, how they wanted, of course, to be open and to advance peace, etc. Now, and underlies educational initiatives in Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Now, the third era, from 1968 to 1988. The Cold War and political unrest in this era brought about, to bring about means to bring change to happen. Some changes in the field of communication study. How? The 1970s and 1980s witnessed the emergence of academic females. Underline it because this is really important. Witnessed the emergence of females who entered the professorates in some countries, which means they became professors, and at the same time they became academics. We say also academicians, but let's say the common one is academics, who interested in some countries and began to develop social works and collective consciousness. Now, I have started to deal the issue from the perspective of the female. Before 1968, most of the studies, most of the research, most of, let's say, the beliefs, most of the theory, of course, picture from her own perspective. And you have to understand that the perspective of the female is totally different from the perspective of the male. They gave their own definitions. That's what I'm talking about. For example, I might ask you about how do you view the child as a father, and how do you view the child as a mother. Yes, I am sure that there are common points, common ideas between them. But the mother views the child according to her own perspective and perspectives, according to her own beliefs, and also according to her own emotions, etc. Anyway, give their own definitions and meaning to the field of communication studies. Marxism, pay attention. This is, of course, another theory that you were supposed to study, the influence of Marxism on media studies. Anyway, you were supposed to study this as well. Marxists and neo-Marxists circulated widely in this era. The influence, pay attention, the influence of Marxism, the influence of communism, the influence of socialism, and maybe I will provide with a lot of examples. A lot of coups, or what we call revolutions. Okay? A lot of revolutions took place in the Arab world in the 1970s, 1960s, 1970s. If you know where exactly, provide me with some countries. If you know, of course. I'm talking about those military coups. What we say coup. It's not coup, by the way. Coup is, of course, it's a military revolution. Okay? Okay? We say coup. So a lot of coups took place. Where, if you know? In Egypt. In fact, in Egypt, it took place in 1952. Egypt in 1952. Okay. Let's say Egypt. Where else? So where else? We have Egypt. We have also Guys, I'm talking about the Arab world. And in France, no coups took place, no revolution took place. You're talking to me about the revolution that took place, of course, in the 19th century. I'm talking about here, from 1968 on. Algeria took place, in fact, in 1992. But it was against, of course, here, or the coup to prevent Islamists from taking power. Anyway, Saudi Arabia, no. Guys, it's a catastrophe. You don't know anything. Pay attention. We have Libya, Muammar Gaddafi. He revolted against the king, Idris the second. We have also Syria, Tunisia, no. Because in Tunisia, of course, here we have, that name, if I remember, Bourguiba, and after Bourguiba, we had, of course, Bin Abidin bin Ali. Okay, I'm talking about from 1968 to 1988. Yes, so we have Syria, okay, Hafez Assad. We have, of course, also in three military coups took place. The last one was by Saddam Hussein. Also, we have also another military coup that took place, I think, in Yemen. Okay, and also etc. Most of these revolutions or military revolutions, in fact, or coups, took place, okay, because of the influence of Marxism. The influence of Marxism. And the influence by Marxism because of the influence of mass media. So you have to pay attention to this. This is really important. Okay, let's continue. Now, Antonio Gramsci is, of course, is the founder. Is the founder of the theory of hegemony or hegemony. Anyway, to define it's the theory of one of the theories of the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci's prison notebooks. So prison notebooks. This in fact, his book were translated into English, French, German, and Arabic in the early 1970s, making his concept of hegemony wildly, again, understand without understanding him, widely available and advancing further understanding of how power is maintained through communication and culture. So here, hegemony, in fact, is, as I said, is the theory of power. It's the theory of power, and it includes a lot of aspects. And as I said, I would like you please to read about it. Now you have enough time. Now,
sir, we did study about them in culture studies as some of the disciplinary of culture.
Okay, what did you study regarding hegemony?
We studied about hegemony not as a mass media theory, but as culture, as one of the disciplinary of culture studies, as well as Marxism and socialism and.
But you're not supposed to study socialism. I'm not talking about socialism as a media. No, I didn't talk about that. Marxism,
but we did.
Media theories.
We did include the hegemony and media, and we did include media in the hegemony theory while we're studying it in culture.
But in fact, you study hegemony, of course, in relation to media studies, not really in relation to culture. Anyway, I don't care about that. But generally speaking, I'm interested in this theory, in fact. How this theory, in fact, can influence the receiver, okay? And change the view, the perspective of the receiver. This is really important. With examples, we need a lot of examples, and we need only say reference, Marxist newspaper, in order to further understand what it's about. Anyway, hegemony itself, remember, I will give you just one example regarding hegemony. And this, in fact, hegemony was employed, in fact, in advertising. Power, how to push you to something. Okay? It's like how to set rules in your mind and how to control something. For example, 1970s, in fact, one of those jeans companies or trousers companies in the United States launched, in fact, a new type of jeans. It was the first at that time. Now what happened? At that time, I forgot what we call them. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the movement. Yes, hippies. Yes. At that time, by some hippies, and those hippies, in fact, added some modifications, and they started using and wearing those jeans. Basically, all hippies at that time, okay, started using those jeans, of course, after adding the modifications. A lot of people in general, and of course, you know that Hitler was a movement that emerged in the United States in the 70s, etc., etc. They had their own beliefs, etc., etc. Anyway, to get into this, we don't have time for that. Generally speaking, people stopped buying those jeans. I'm talking about ordinary people. Why? Because logically, wearing those jeans means that hippie. This is how hippies imposed themselves. And how they imposed something, and this is how they took it. So this is an example of hegemony and how it can be included, of course, in advertising, in media, etc. Is it clear? Yes? Please confirm. Yes? Is it clear? Okay. It's finished. Now, Kramer, by the way, one of the pioneers of the Frankfurt School, and Adorno. So Kramer and Adorno, the same thing also, the founders of the Frankfurt School. So for Kramer and Adorno's dialects of enlightenment, remember that, of course, this is another book, was translated into English in 1973, a year before Martin J. 1973, important study of the Frankfurt School. So pay attention here. Generally speaking, Martin J. in fact shed light on the Frankfurt School and studied the Frankfurt School and simplified the Frankfurt School for students to understand it. This is, of course, starting from 1973, students in the United States and of course, in other countries, but not in the Arab world, by the way, started, of course, to understand the importance of the Frankfurt School, okay? And how, of course, mass media in general, how mass media shaped, let's say, the general opinion. And the list of the Jamaican-born Stuart Hall. You have a familiar course with Stuart Hall. Stuart Hall, in fact, is a great, is still alive. He's the big sociologist, psychologist, and at the same time, ethnographist. Now, the center, so here, Stuart Hall, the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies in Birmingham, developed new critical framework. So Stuart Hall, in fact, started to provide also his influence in communication theory and cultural studies. Now, from 1989 to present, new liberalism, global growth, okay, globalization, and other disciplines. Now, the era of communication studies marks the revolution that began in Estonia in 1989. Talking here about the era of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So resulting in the collapse of communism, let me say communism in fact with capital C, of communism, the end of the Cold War, and the acceleration of neoliberalism, transitional phenomena altering the shape of media, education, and much else. Which means that now we have finished from the influence of Marxism, and we have started a new era featured by the dominance, by the dominance and the domination of neoliberalism. Okay? Neoliberalism, liberalism, or neoliberalism. Freedom to do whatever you want. Liberalism, capitalism, etc. And in order, by the way, neoliberalism as an ideology, in order, again, to impose this new ideology, in fact, I need to employ again different means, different media tools to convince the receiver that this ideology fits, okay, that this ideology fits him or fits her, is appropriate, okay? Since the early 1990s, communication study has grown dramatically. That's it. A lot of universities, okay, in fact, have started to introduce communication study as a new discipline, even in Moroccan, even in Moroccan university today, in a number, in a number, of course, of universities, we have, of course, masters in communication. We have communication studies, cultural studies, even if they are cultural studies, but in fact they include communication and strategy. Have grown dramatically around the world, fed, verb to feed, by the growth of information societies, media consumption, and public discourses about the widespread importance of communication. That's it. Now, the importance of communication technology, and so on and so forth, in fact, have this new discipline. New and existing organizations facilitated the development of research. That is, money helps, of course, establish a number of organizations to facilitate research related to communication. By the late 1990s, United States-based International Communication Association, it's an association, pay attention, was taking steps to mirror the first word in its name. Subfields and journals proliferated, and multiple intellectuals and paradigms informed and fed research and teaching around the world. So here they have encouraging communication study in different countries. So here, yes, finished the history of communication studies and communication or general communication study theory. Now, I'm expecting, of course, I believe that, of course, you have your own questions, you have your own inquiries. Again, as I keep telling, I am all ears. You are free to give your comments. If, for example, that you want to add something, you will enrich the discussion. So please go ahead. I'm listening. Yes, please. So the floor is yours. Yes. But generally speaking, you should go back, Usama. You should go back, of course, here to the course itself. As I told you, we have a lot. I want you to make your own. The most prominent ones, in fact, we can study about, let's say, the Frankfurt School. You have the Frankfurt School. And then, the theories introduced by the Frankfurt School. We don't have one theory. We have different theories, of course, that were introduced by the Frankfurt School, including, as I told you, the hypothetical needle theory. Also, just keyword, read, okay, and you will get a lot. Okay? Just keyword it, and you will get a lot of theories. We have the uses and gratifications approach. We have the agenda system theory. We have the ones. Okay? Yes. Got the others? Of course. Yes, I will share this here with you. Of course, I will share it. I will share it with you. After finishing, I will share it with you. Don't worry about that. Yes, the others? So as I told you, I will share this slide that you do not worry, please. It's your right. Yes, the others? Is the lecture well understood? Do you understand in the slide lectures? Within Adnan within. Can I share the recording of the class? the for this online session. I didn't understand you. You are free, of course. If you want, of course, to share it with your classmates, you can share it with your classmates. I don't have a problem. But do not put it on the platform, because there are problems, of course, on the platforms, Adnan. There are problems, in fact, on the platform. You can share it with your classmates. It's not a big deal. Okay? But there are a lot of technical problems, and you have seen and witnessed some of these, of course, technical problems. Anyway, normally Big Room is one of the best platforms, but I don't know what happened, in fact. No, I don't know. To be frank, I don't know. Yes. Yes, the others? Your questions, please? Okay. Anyway, as we said, attention. As I said, okay, Hassan Mustafa, I'm wondering if you could give me the permission to share this slide on Facebook. Yes, of course. You can, yes, Mustafa, you can share it. As I said, you can share it on your Facebook. You don't have a problem, of course, with that. You're free. Yes, the others. Yes, Hassan Mustafa, I believe that, yes, if you hear things that is right. It's better to share it, yes, to share it on Google Classroom. That's better. In order to, in fact, to avoid reserved rights, permissions, okay, you might propose, so, because we're talking about the platform, which is Big Blue Button. Sometimes they don't like, of course, Facebook to share their content. So I don't know, but this is I'm just advising you. You might encounter, of course, some rights problems. Okay. So I prefer, of course, here, so you can share it on Google Classroom. It's better. The most important thing now, of course, as I said, just take into account media theory. I want you at least to know the different media theories that we have in media studies. They will help you. Okay? They will help you at least to grasp, let's say, different concepts and the different meanings. Okay? Now, so as I told you, Mustafa, so please put it on Google Classroom. As we said, this is it's more professional, as she said. Yes, I agree with her. At the same time, to avoid problems, again, on Big Blue Button, there are technical problems, and in fact, I want to avoid these technical problems in order to communicate freely with you and to even communicate with you without technical problems. Anyway, so thank you for attending this online session. I hope it is well understood. Another thing that I want you to consider, in fact, is remain again to the class session next week. So yesterday, in fact, yesterday was exception for me in the class session because I introduced some concepts because it was my first session, my first in-class session with you. So I explained some concepts and I shed light on them. But next week I will not. Not next week, in 2 weeks. In fact, I will attend the class session or in the in-person session just to receive your questions if you believe that you still have, of course, more questions and more inquiries. Okay? Anyway, so thank you so much for, again, for attending this online session and see you next week, inshallah. Again, I will provide you with another, of course, here with another slide lecture and another online lecture. And next week, inshallah, we will move to approaches, of course, to approaches that are related to communication theory. Thank you, and enjoy the remainder of the day. Bye.